All right, perfect. Okay. I'm going to broadcast this on YouTube, but it's going to be a totally different experience because I can't share the screen. But I guess if you want to look at both YouTube and Zoom, it can be kind of entertaining. So I'm going to start this on YouTube as well. Oops. All righty. Almost ready. Should I play some theme music? Oh, hey, Connie. Hi. We'll start in a few minutes. Um, can you guys still see my screen? Um, can you guys see that? Hi, Jackie. My hand. I don't understand.
No, she's asking if we can see her video, her feed at the top.
Oh, no, I got it. Let me.
She was trying to cover it up.
Oh, she wants to cover it up.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, give me one more second here. Almost there. I see more people showing up. So we'll start in a few more minutes. I want to broadcast this on YouTube, so I'll give you the link. For YouTube. How's everybody doing?
Better.
Better?
Better.
Like adjusting, or how are you feeling? Were you sick?
Yeah.
What was it? Just the flu?
Upper respiratory infection.
Oh, do they know what it was, or?
No, they just said it was an upper respiratory infection, and they put me on another week of rest, which kind of worked out because couldn't do anything anyway. But yeah, I'm doing a lot better though. Just trying to build my strength back up.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was sick like in January,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like a sinus thing. But it totally wiped me out.
I know mine started as that because I always have congestion in my head because I have sinus issues anyway. So I couldn't figure out what it was. Was it sinus infection? Was it, something else? And then it went down into my chest. So that wasn't fun.
Well, as long as you're feeling better, that's good.
Lots better. I still sound like I'm good, but I'm okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a challenging couple of weeks, but I think we should be able to get through it.
Yeah.
It's like I like to stay at home anyways. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's like it's crazy in Los Angeles. I don't like to go out and it's like
I don't do crowds.
Yeah. So I think for some people it'll be just fine. Okay. All right. The only thing I'm trying to do here is get a YouTube link going. So let's see. Okay, I think I'm good actually. So let's see. Let me see who's here. So Felicia, Antonio, Connie, Dustin, Jason, and Jackie. Okay. And I'm recording this, so you'll have a copy of this as well. So let's see. And I will send you a link. So if you want to watch this from a different perspective, you can see me, right? YouTube link. Oh, and I have to. I just have multiple cameras set up.
Okay. The only camera we see, or I see, is we will start in a few minutes. That's the only thing I see.
Oh, you see that one? Okay, so let me click this.
Okay, now I see you.
Now you see me. All right. And then I have a link for YouTube, so I'll send you the link.
Are the slides on Canvas?
And the slides are not on Canvas, but I can put them on Canvas too. If you want to go through the slides as I go through them, we can do it like that.
If you could, that would.
Sure. So I have a couple of things though, just to show you. So the way I can do this is, which is kind of fun, I got a down shooter. So I'm going to move away for a second. Oh, let me fix myself here. Okay, I look better. I got a down shooter, so we can I can draw. You can see my hand. So we can add notes. And plus it's kind of cool. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
It's very slow.
Yeah, it might be a little slow. But we can do that. We can create wireframes and examples like this. So it's kind of a fun way to do it.
Just a weird feeling.
And then let me switch over to the presentation. Okay. So we're going to cover, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through the box model again, more detail. And I will put this presentation on Canvas. So if you want, you can go through it with me. Does everybody have brackets on their computer? Do you guys have brackets installed? Do you have a laptop with you right now, or are you just mainly watching through your device?
I have brackets installed on both of my devices.
Okay.
I have only one device and I can only use it.
What you could do is if you're using your computer, I'll send you the presentation, but you can divide the screens up. So I can have one side can be my presentation, and one side can be your Zoom. So you can do it like that.
Okay.
And then you can have brackets on the other side if you want, because I'm going to go through some examples. Or you can just switch back and forth. If you want, you can switch back and forth. So you can do it that way too. So you can do it multiple ways as well. So let me first give you.
Okay, right? Would Adam be okay?
Oh yeah, Adam. You can use Adam. That's fine.
Okay.
Visual Studio, whatever you guys want to use, actually. And that was Wen, right? Wen?
Yes.
So Wen was asking if we can use Adam. So Adam is another developing environment. You call them IDEs, integrated developing environments. So she's just asking if she can use Adam. And Adam is another one that's out there.
Is it free?
Yes. Most of these environments are free, actually. So let me just show you. I'll just go to Adam. And Adam's a great tool to use as well.
Good to.
So it's similar to brackets, except there's a lot more features in it. There's a lot more plugins you can add. But it pretty much does the same thing.
Okay.
So this is what Adam looks like. So you can go to adam.io if you want to download Adam. So it's a nice, they call it an integrated developing environment. That's what Adam is.
Okay.
So I'm going to get you the link for the presentation. And I will send it into Canvas here. So I'll send everybody, we can do it like this. So here is the link. So I'm going to send you it via chat. So now everybody has the link to the presentation. And I will also send another link. This is optional. I'm broadcasting on YouTube. So if you want to check out this on YouTube, you can. I think it might be a little bit slower on YouTube. It just depends on your connection. And I guess I'm doing a lot with these multiple presentations. But here is the YouTube link. I'm going to cut and paste this, and I'll put it inside the chat too. And if you watch this, just make sure the volume is turned down. So here's the link to YouTube as well. So you can watch this via YouTube. So does everybody have the presentation?
Okay.
So I'll just go through this. This is kind of a review. We talked about this last time. So this is what we call the box model. It's the underlying structure of everything that we create on the web page. So basically what you're looking at is what the box model is. So when you create a tag, you create a P tag, any sort of tag, H tag, a div. The underlying tag itself has all of these features. And these features are what you can bring about with your style sheets. But by default, all of your tags on a block level, and when I say block level, we're talking about your block level tags. So A tags, H1 tags, div tags. These are block level tags. And remember how we talk about block level versus inline? So inline tags are like your B tag for bold, for italics, even anchor tag. That's an inline tag. It's a tag that appears within a block, basically. So this model right here applies to your block level tags. So this is a very basic view. And when you look at padding, border, and margin, those are the actual properties for your style sheets. Content is the information within the box itself. So text or an image, whatever appears in that box. So here's another view. This is a more relatively more detailed view of the box model. Margin, border, padding, and the padding now, what's important to think about is the padding is the part that gets pushed in, and the border adds thickness, and the margin is the part that gets pushed out. So when you use padding, it's creating a inner margin. You could say it's like an inner margin around the content, and that only affects the content inside the box. And then when you're using border and margin, that's pushing the content out. So when you have two boxes next to each other, the margin is going to separate it, and along with the border, it's going to create almost a column between the two. So margin is responsible for separating your content. The padding adds space between the content and the outside of that box. So, and this gets into even more detail. So when you start to utilize your various properties for your styles, you have a margin property, but you also have a margin top, and you have a margin bottom and a margin right. And I'll show you in more detail when we get into brackets, but you can only adjust the right margin if you want to, or the left margin, or you can adjust them both at the same time. So you have that option available to you. You don't have to do all sides. at once. You can use what's called shorthand, the shorthand property, to affect each of the sides as you want to individually. So all documents, so this is kind of repeating what I just said. All document elements generate a rectangular box called the element box, and that describes the amount of space that the element occupies in the layout, and each box influences the position and size of other boxes. So here's an example. So if one box is 1 inch tall, then you're flowing, you know, if you're not positioning things otherwise, you're flowing from top to bottom. And then the distance of the next box will be 1 inch from the top, because you started with 1 inch of height for the initial box. So the next box is going to be pushed down 1 inch. If the first box was made to be 2 inches tall, then it would push it down an additional inch. So every time you add height, it's going to push down what's below it. The same way with the width, it's going to push down what's next to it. So this is basically repeating what I just said. So you can, with CSS, you're taking that box model, and you can, that initial box can be considered a parent element, and then you can put additional things inside the box. So you can basically create regions on your page, and that can be based on your wireframe. So you're going to look at the box model as the means to organize everything on the page itself. And the idea is, when you're doing this, the width, the height, and the padding not only reflect the size, but it's all about the relationships of everything. So your width, height, and padding is basically taking the relationship of everything around it in the design that you're creating. The other thing that's important too, though, width, height, padding, and margin alone, and actually border should be included in here, but if you use width, height, padding, margin alone, and you have no content in that box, you won't see anything. So what you also need is a background color and the border. So without a border and background color, sometimes what happens is you add your width and your height and you expect to see that box, and you don't. Well, that's because you didn't have that background color or any content in the box. So by itself, these 4 properties are creating that box, but if you don't have background color, content, or a border, you're not going to see the box anyways.
I'm having problems finding the PowerPoint. Where is it located at on Canvas?
Oh, do you see the, I sent you a link in the chat. I didn't put it on Canvas yet.
Oh, okay.
But I'll put it.
Oh, chat. Okay.
You see it right there? I highlighted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you click on that, you should be able to get into it.
Okay.
So, okay, let's see here. So are you good, Felicia? Did you find it?
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay. So I'm just going to go through some of the properties in more detail here. Let's see. So width and height. The width is the distance from the left inner edge to the right inner edge. So you're beginning at the left side of the page, going to the right. And the height is the distance from the top, the inner top, to the inner bottom. So the way to think about it is like this. You have so think about it like this. So your web page itself, there's a X width and a Y height. And you have like this point here. This is, you could say this is like your origin. So everything begins at the origin, and there would be your box there, and you have your width and your height, and that's where things begin. Now, when you use positioning, you can change that. You can change that with the position property, but by default, you're going to begin at the upper, actually upper left-hand corner. So you start at the left-hand corner. So you start with your width is from the left side, and your height is from the top, and that's where everything begins on the page. So it's almost similar to a coordinate system in like 3D design, let's say. You have that origin point, and you have an X and a Y to consider. Your X is the width, your Y is the height. You know, we never use the terminology X and Y in web design, but we actually use another term to describe depth. So you actually have depth as well, and your depth is your Z index, and that's something we haven't gotten into yet, but you can create depth or layer things using a Z index. And in 3D design, if you have a height, which is Y, a width, which is your X distance, your Z distance is your depth. So you have X, Y, Z. So that's kind of a standard Cartesian coordinate system that is also being utilized with HTML and CSS. So I kind of wanted to go through values with you. So we didn't really get into detail about this. So we have your, by default, your height and width will have a property called auto. So you don't have to specify this, but the width and the height have auto property by default. You also have a length property. So the length property has various units, and I'm going to go through the units with you. You have a percentage property. It's basically a percentage of a container block. So you can say that something has a width based on the percentage of its parent. You can say initial. So that's kind of the same thing as auto, where you're giving it a height and width. You're just giving it a default value. And then inherent is taking the size of a parent value. So it's kind of similar to saying 100%. So you could have a box in a box, but each box is going to take the parent value of the next box. So in detail, I'll go through these with you. So these are the units that you can use. So this applies to width and height, margin, padding, border. So these are your units. You have centimeters, millimeters, inches, pixels, points, and picas. Did I ever talk about points and picas with you? So a point is basically a unit that is very common, in graphic design. So 1 point is 1/72 units of an inch. So when you're doing graphic design for print, and these were measurement values that were developed in like the early 19th century when it came to metal typesetting. So in graphic design, if you break up an inch, you can break it up into units of 72. And there's this other standard called a pica in graphic design as well. So this is coming from the world of print. So a pica is basically there's six picas in a point. So you have 72 picas in a point, or 72 picas in an inch, and 6 points, or 6 picas in a point. So this is based on graphic design units. So you most likely will never use these. Most of the time, if you're using absolute length units, you're going to use pixels. So
I still have a question.
yes.
Because on the Adobe like Illustrator and Photoshop, I thought they used like points.
Yeah, you can change that. So if you use the ruler tool in Illustrator or Photoshop, it depends on when you create that document for the first time. So when you create the document for the first time, you can define your units. Now, if you're creating a wireframe, I think the best thing to do is stick to, if you're in Photoshop, stick to pixels. And if you're in Illustrator, stick to points. As you can see here in the presentation, pixels and points are kind of equivalent, because when Apple came out with their CRT monitors back in the mid-70s, they used a standard of 72 pixels per inch on the screen. Now, when Windows came out, a pixel in Windows is defined by 96 pixels. So the ratio is different on a Windows machine, but when you're using this scale, it really doesn't matter. So 72, since Apple did it first, became the standard. So basically that's the standard. So when you're working in Photoshop, always make sure it's set to 72. And if you click on your ruler, and I can kind of show you here, I'll open up Illustrator, and you'll see this example. So here in Illustrator, if I hit Control R or Command R, I get the ruler on top, right? And then if I right click on it, I can pick my units. So right now it's set to pixels, but I can switch it to points.
Yeah.
And here too is my origin, so I can bring that out. There's my origin. So I can right click, make it points, pixels, picas. This is the pica measurement, and then inches and centimeters, which, I mean, you understand those units. But those are what we call absolute units. So let me see here. Let me get back to where I was. So those are our absolute units. Let's see, let me close some of this stuff out. So those are absolute units. Yeah, so most likely you'll never use points and picas, but I'm just telling you this so you know that these are the units that you can use. This link goes to an article about 72 versus 96 versus 300. So 72 pixels is the standard that you'll always want to use. The reason why it's mentioning 96 is just like I said, Apple defined 72 early on. So monitors, the size, come in these sizes, and then you would take that 72 and multiply it by the size of the monitor itself to get your actual resolution for that monitor. But if you want to read this will actually go through the differences. You'll never use 300, so be careful if you are creating something, an image, and whatever reason it's huge. Well, you probably have the wrong resolution set. 300's for print, so 72 and 96 are for the web, but you can just stick to 72. That's just fine. So you can have, if you want to have a look at that presentation, you can, that web page. So I'll just, here I got a couple web pages in brackets, and I can just kind of quickly show you the differences here. So here Here we're measuring in points. So I have a header, I have another H2 header, I have a P tag, and this is what it looks like. So header 1 is in 50 points, header 2, 25, paragraph is set to 15. Then I got a line height here as well to separate the two. So 25 to separate the two. So that's using points. And I can send you these in a separate document, but here we're using inches. So when I use inches, I use 1 n. Here, half of an inch. Here, 1/5 of an inch. Yeah, it's kind of following the same pattern that we had with points. So that's using inches. And here I'll show you picas. And so here's the pica unit. So PC is for pica. So same thing though, you could kind of figure this out if you did the math. So 3 picas is going to be, there's six picas in an inch. So this is basically a 1/2 inch. So you just, 6 divided by 3 is goes into that 2 times. So you take an inch divided by 2, and that's a half inch. So those are your absolute values. And you'll always want to, if you're doing absolute values, you want to stick to pixels. Here, absolute values are not recommended for screen layout because screens vary in size so much, so you'll never know what that user is going to be using for their screen. So really, you should stay away from using absolute values. When you use absolute values, you call that being non-responsive. So a non-responsive web design uses absolute values. Relative lengths is what we would want to use for what we call responsive web design. So the relative length means that the measurement is going to be relative to something else. So
what does it mean when you say non-responsive? How does that affect the website itself? If a website is non-responsive, what does that mean in terms of operating it?
Sure. So here, I'll create an example for you. So I'll create something here using the box model that we're talking about. And I'm going to create a quick web page. So I'll do an example showing you what a non-responsive page is.
Is that for the mobile, maybe like website, this kind of?
Well, responsive is for the website or is for a mobile type experience. And non-responsive means it would be for a non-mobile experience. So here, show you this real quick. You're going to move this. I'm moving my other camera as I do this. So here. Okay, so I'm going to create this web page here. And this is going to be representing what's non-responsive, what Felicia is asking. What is a non-responsive web page? So I'll create, got my head tag, body tag, and then I'll create a style sheet in here. and a style tag. And I'm going to apply this to something that has a class name of, let's call it .nr for non-responsive. So in the body, I will have a div, and then that div will have a class equal to nr. So right now there's a div. I have this style tag with the class in it. So I'll give it a width of, let's say 200 pixels. So since I'm using pixels now, I'm using an absolute measurement. I give it a height of 200 pixels. I'll give it a background color of blue. I'll give it a margin of 10 pixels. And I'll give it a border of red. So I'm using pixels here. So the idea with pixels is that it's a non-responsive unit, or you could say it's an absolute unit. So we'll look at the page. So I have a box, but the idea now is, and let me make the box bigger actually. Let me make it now, instead of 200, I'll make it 12,000. So the idea with a non-responsive page, this box is 12,000 pixels, but when I grab the right side of my window and I drag it, that box overlaps now. It goes beyond the boundary of the web page. So it's not responding to the user dragging that window, making it bigger or smaller. So that's the idea behind non-responsive. I'm using absolute units, and when I use absolute units, those units ensure that that box stays at a fixed size based on the units that I'm using. Now, if I change this to a value that's responsive, so a percentage value is responsive. So instead of saying pixels, I will say 100%. And now what happens is I set 100 for the height and the width. So now when I change that size, make it bigger or smaller, now the box itself is the size of the window. So the actual box is responding to the size of the window. So that's the difference. That's the difference between responsive and non-responsive. And if I use relative units, then I can assure that that box is going to always be the size that I want for the page. So let me go through, I'll show you a couple values for responsive pages. And these are the values I recommend you using when you're doing any type of responsive development. So when I say responsive development, that means creating something that I know will allow the content to be viewable on a mobile device, a tablet, or a web page.
Hey, Professor.
So, yes.
I have a question. So when you change it to 100% and you use relative units, but then I noticed your margin, it was still in pixels.
Oh.
So which one dominates?
Well, in this circumstance, in here you can use a combination. So the height and the width would basically control, but if you look to, if I increase the border, let's say to 20 pixels, you see how the border goes beyond, but if I change that to a percent, and I say, this one gets a little bit more tricky. I'd have to say, you might have to use a combination of, let's say, margin and pixel. So let me see. So what I have to do probably is push that margin in. Let's see. Because the border is going beyond the page itself. So the width and the height is going to push it out, but that margin and border is being pushed out as well. So let me see if I do. So I'd have to figure out what is the right measurement to use. Yeah, I'd be curious how to get that to work. So I'm not even sure how to get that to work so the actual border stays within the viewport. So let me see. Yeah, I have to figure that out. So yeah, width and height, setting it to 100% is going to make it responsive, but the border itself now is not really being responsive, meaning that on my right and bottom, it's not being contained within that. What you might have to do is put a box within a box and have that one box kind of dictate the other box. So what you could do is nest probably the boxes. So if I take this div and put it inside, let's see. Or actually what I'd have to do is create another one, but now you can see I got the border. So you'd have to place a div within a div, and the outer div would have no border, but the inner div would, and then it can stay within there. That's kind of one kind of way to ensure that you have a border. So see how I have the border there? Now I have the border on the inside. So does that answer your question? Sometimes it does get tricky when you're using relative values. They may not apply to some of these properties, or they may not work in the way that you expect, but you would have to figure out a combination of tricks to get what you want to work in the way that you want to have it work. So let me go through some of these other ones. So you saw me use an M value. So an M value is going to be a popular value to use for a responsive design. So that is basically relative to, and this is more for your typography on the web, that's relative to the font size. And same way with the X value as well. You have something called an X height. That's part of the font that you're using. Every font has an X height. So those are basically values that you want to use for responsive design, or here I'm saying scalable, meaning when you increase the size, the fonts get bigger. When you decrease the size, the fonts get smaller. So here's an example of using M. So here I have a font size, an initial font size set to 16 pixels. And oops, that's the wrong one. Oh yeah, and a line height set to 2 Ms. And then I have a span in here that's set to 0.5 M. So when we look at this, so your paragraphs have a height of 2 Ms for the line height. So what that means is it's taking your font size, which is 16, and it's multiplying it by 2. And then this span down here, which is represented by the text I have highlighted, that's looking at the size of the div, and it's multiplying it by 0.5. So if you look down below, you have this div set and you have the span. So the span is basically an inline information within the div itself. So what the M is looking at is the parent. So the parent of the span is the div. So if the parent has a certain font size, then the div is going to be, the M is going to be a multiplier of the font size of what's inside that div. So you guys understand that? You can say yes down below here. Like if you understand, you can click on yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So that's the way the M works. The M is looking at the parent, right? So here I'm gonna open this up. So this span is the child of the div. The div is the parent of the span. If the span font size is set to 0.5, you're basically looking at the font size of what's inside the parent, which is set to 30. And so this span here, which is the HTML created from that, is going to be half of 30. So that's how an M works. So next we have X. So X is relative to the X height. And so you understand, just so you know what an X height is. So you look, question?
No, just like for the relative length, like whatever it will put the box inside the middle.
You're asking to put the box inside the middle, like are you are you saying you want to have something in the middle of the page? So when you
always in the middle.
So what if you want to have something always in the middle? This is something we haven't talked about, but I can show you. What you can do is set your margin to auto. So let me go into, let's see. So remember this example with this box that I just created. So here I have a margin set to 1 pixel. Let's say I make the width 50%. And then I'll make the margin auto. And then when we do this, now when I drag the left side here, the box always stays in the middle. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, so the trick to ensuring that your content always stays in the middle of the page is use a margin with a property set to auto.
Can also make the text like for the middle line.
When you say middle line, what are you? Oh, you mean vertically?
Yeah.
It doesn't work vertically. So yeah, there's no way to vertically have it set.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just works from left to right. It doesn't work from top to bottom, unfortunately. So there could be tricks though to getting that to work. You could use a percentage for a height. So now I'm using a percentage of 40%. And then I could push the margin down. So actually I want to, so we'll get into top, bottom, left, right properties for margins. So I can push that margin down too, and I can do something like that. So now I push the margin down 100 pixels, but I'm also using a height of 40%. So it's still relative. And you can combine absolute and relative as well. So you might want to do that. So instead of using a percentage here, you know, maybe I'll just stick with, you know, 200 pixels. So that box will stay in the middle and the width will change. You know, so you get something like that. So you have all these different ways of doing things. Using a combination of absolute and relative. So that's using a combination of different units will get you different results. And there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You can always use combinations in your design. So, you know, that's something that you want to think about as you're working.
Okay.
So any questions about that? So let me go through some of these other values so you know what they are. So x is relative to the x height, so that's what I was showing you with this example. So your x height is basically the size of the height of the lowercase x in a font. So right here, that's your x height. So, you know, no matter what font you're using, all these x heights are going to be relative to that font. So different fonts will have different x heights, but in typography, the term x height always refers to the height of the lowercase x. So that's your x height. So that's a property that's part of every font that you use for your web page. And so you can say, let's make it relative to the x. It works the same way as the m. It's very rarely used. I'll show you the example in brackets. So this is an example where I have this span that is set to 1x. So if we look at this, so you have this font that's set to 30, this div, and then the span is set to basically half the size of the x. And so if I increase the size of that web page, you can see how everything increases relatively as I scale up. So this is still half the size of the lowercase x. So that's an x unit, which is also a relative unit. Next, we have ch. So ch is relative to a width of 0. So this is what ch looks like. So here I have the font size of this div set to 3. ch. And give it a few seconds. So ch is basically the width relative to the character, the 0 character in that font. So this is another one that you'll rarely use. So, but it's a multiplier. So you basically look at the size of what that 0 is, and you'll multiply it. So it's expanding, basically expanding the width. You know, ensuring that as that page gets bigger, everything gets wider. And these things too apply to the scalability of the page itself. When you think about scalability, it's just when you use your control plus or minus to make that web page bigger. Everything is being scaled relative. Or it can apply to a phone or tablet screen size as well. So when that screen size is smaller, then you can have the smaller text look bigger based on the size of the screen. Next we have rem. So rem is relative what you would call the root element. So I'll show you an example of this. So this web page here, the div has a font size of 3 rems. So the root of the element is basically your, it's the set font size for that web page. So every web page has a set font size, and typically it's 16 pixels. So if you have rem of 3, it's a multiplier of the set font size for the web page. If you go into a browser, you can change your set font size. You can go into preferences for Chrome or Firefox, and you can change that default size, meaning every time you open up a web page, you can make your fonts bigger if you'd like to have the text bigger. And so that's your root font size, and that multiplier is applied to the root font size. So rem is applied to the root font size, but then you have to think about m is, m is, you can have an m relate to the parent element. So you think about if you have a tag within a tag, and a p tag that has a font size of 16, and then you have another p tag within that, but they both have are set to m's. The first m will actually be relative to the root font size, and then the second m will be relative to the first m. So m's are relative to each other, but rem is just relative to the root element. So you can have a rem set for your body text, and then p tags set to m's, and those m's would be relative to that body text, because all the p tags are basically children of the body tag. A p tag is a child to the body tag. VW now is relative to what we call the viewport. So your window, your browser window, is your viewport, and that's a term that you'll use a lot for relative web design. So it's just the size, the width, or the height of the window itself. So if I scale up my window, then the font should scale with it. So here's an example of that using VW. So here, the font size for this H1 is set to 20 VWs. So the word hello, this is using VW. And if I make the web page bigger or smaller, then that text is relative to the size of the web page as I'm making it bigger or smaller. You see the text below, it's not changing, but hello is changing because hello is using this VW unit. So this is another unit to consider for responsive design purposes. If you need to have text appear within that screen size, use a VW for that unit. So it's a nice unit to use. And then you have a couple variations of that here. So we have VH, which is basically relative to the height. So if you make the page taller, increase the height of the page, then you can increase the size or decrease it with VH. And then you have a VM and a Vmax. So these two, VM and Vmax, would be used for, let's say, for a phone screen. So a phone screen is going to have a set viewport size for the browser on that screen. So you can use these two for phones and tablets for that type of responsive design to ensure that the tax always stays big or small when going to a smaller viewport. Percentage is what we used in that first example. So if you just put percent with the unit, then you can make something bigger or smaller with percent. So that's another good unit to use. So any questions? So these are your units. So you have it in your presentation on Canvas. So always think about the units that you're using and what you're designing. So it's important to think about those two things.
So when you have using VW units versus percentage units, each of those is responsive, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All these units, all these units are responsive. So EM, EX, CH, REM, VW, VH, VMin, VMAX, and percentage are all responsive.
Okay.
But you'll use a combination too. So as you saw in that example, I was using a combination of percentage for the length, let's say, or the width, and then using pixels for the margin. So you're going to have to figure out combinations. I kind of want to go back to that example, so I'll go back. So here, you know, I have a width set to 50, and then I have percent, but then I have a height set to 200. So I'm using a combination of relative and absolute units within this class style. I think here too, what you could do is, if you want to assure that your border is always visible, the border doesn't really use a percentage. You want to stick with an absolute value for your borders. You don't want your borders to scale up usually, but I think one of the questions that was asked by Jason is, how do you, what has precedence? Well, the height and width would kind of have precedence, and if you want to see that border, maybe what you do is a width of 98, you know, or 99. So now when I scale this, it fits in. But if I do 100 for my width percentage, and I would have to do, well, and I'll get rid of this margin of auto. Let's see. Actually, let me make, let me see if I can. So I increased the margin here. I won't do it as drastically. The 6, it pushes it out. But if I made the width, let's say 98, then I can see that full margin and that border. But if I make it 100, it pushes it out just far enough where I don't see that right side of that blue box. So it's just this, you got to think in terms of combinations of things to make things look right on the page. And it's going to be a combination of relative and absolute units that you're going to be using. Now, if I go back here and say auto, it pushes back in because now I'm using this automatic auto property for the margin. So that's another key if you want to make sure it fits, use auto. I'm going to talk about border padding and margin now, and you kind of see why I have two values here in margin. But first, I'm going to talk about padding. So padding is the inside. You say it's the inside border. So margin is the outside border. Padding is the inside border, and then border itself adds to that as well. So the padding is affected by the background of the color. So when you add padding, it doesn't do anything to the background color. So if I add padding, let's say of 12 pixels, it doesn't do anything. So you have a background color of blue, it doesn't really affect anything. But if I go to my div tag and I add some content, so I'm going to add content inside the div tag. So when I say add content, I'll add some text in here. And I'll make the text white so you can see it. So I'm going to add a color. And now if I adjust the padding, I'll increase the padding to, let's say, 52. So it increases that padding. So padding is the inside border, but padding ignores, or the background color property is not affected by padding. So adding padding will not add a white inside margin to this. It's going to keep it at the color that was already set for the background color. So that's padding. Now you can affect the top, right, bottom, and left side. So this is how you do that. So when you add padding, it adds padding equally to each side. When you just use padding of 10 pixels, let's say, and that's exactly what I did here. So I had a padding set to 52. So it adds it to the top, bottom, right, and left side. It adds it all around. So that's the default. Does everybody understand that? So when you're using like one unit with padding, it adds it all around. So if they send 10 pixels, it's going to add 10 pixels to every single side. So here's my example. So if I say 10, I just use the value once, but it adds it to top, left, right, all the way around. Now, if you want to add it just to like the top or the bottom, this is what is called shorthand. So you can actually specify up to 4 units. And this applies to padding, margin, and border. So you can specify up to 4 units, 4 values for that. So the property for the amount can have 4 values. Now, if you add 4 values, the first value is your top. Oops. The second value is your right. Third value is your bottom. And your fourth value is your left. If you only add 3 values, then the first value is your top. The second value is your right, and the third value is your bottom. And the second value is your right and left, actually. If you only say 2, then the first value is your top and bottom, and your second value is your right and left. And if you only say 1, then it's all 4 all the way around. So if I go back into
Hello?
what's important, yes?
Oh, okay. You just froze for a sec.
Are you
Okay.
back?
Oh, is it freezing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says it might be because my kids are like, using like Fortnite online or something. So one thing is like I'm recording this, so after the class there'll be a recording that you can watch, and what I'll do is I'll kind of break it up into sections because it's a lot of information. So there can be a section on, let's say, padding, and then a section on margin, and a section on units. I can break it up like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it's going to be, it's like I don't want you to like spend 2 hours going through it again. So anyways, but is it better? Can you see it? Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There's probably a slight delay. There's always going to be a slight delay. So here, let me show you. So if I want to have just padding on the top and right side, what I could do is do two values. So in brackets, let's see, I can say, let's say 52 and then 10 pixels. So 52 is for the top and then 10 pixels is for the left. It's actually for, the first value is actually for top and bottom, and the second value is for left and right. But that's using two values. So first value is top and bottom. Second value is left and right. So does everybody understand that? It's allowing you to position the text now within that box. And that's the shorthand. Now borders, shorthand is a little different. So with a border, you use the first value is the, oops, let me go back. And I see I have to actually, it should be PX. Let me make this bigger too, it's too small. So with a border, the shorthand, this is still considered shorthand because there's actually a border width property, a border color property, and a border type property. But this border by itself combines all those three. So the first value is the width. The second value is the type. So you can have border dash, border, I think, dotted. There's different types of borders. And the third value is your color. And this is actually using, if you see the number sign in front of the numbers for this is using a hexadecimal color. So we'll get into hexadecimal colors in a little bit, but this is how you would use your border. So it's the area outside the box. Or hold on 1 second. So the border actually, let me get into a little bit more detail about border because it's kind of interesting what you can do with borders. So I don't have it in the presentation. But let me show you. Something we can do with a border. So borders, you can actually adjust each border individually if you want to. And let me show you how to do that. So you can So with border, you have, let's say, you can say border bottom. And let me make it a little bit thicker. So if you say border bottom, it's adjusting just the border bottom. Then you could also say border top. I'll just change the color to make it obvious. Then you can do the border top, and then the same thing for left and right as well. See a border left, and make this a different color. So you kind of get this almost like this like picture frame type effect. And I can do border right. Can we do, oops, can I do beige? No. Oops, sorry. And I'll decrease this percentage up here so you can actually see it. So you can get this type of effect by doing each border independently. You can also change the type of borders. So we have border solid is like the standard, but I can say border dotted, get dots, dashed, you get dashes, double, get that double line, inset is like the standard. I can do outset. You can't really tell what that's doing, but I can also do bridge, which is like a double line. So those are your different types of borders, and then you can do a top, left, right individually to get a different effect. And I believe so borders kind of get into more depth. And so there'll be times when maybe you just want, like for design purposes, you just want a left border, which can be kind of nice depending on what you're doing. So that's border. So margin does not have a background color, so it's actually transparent, but it will push the content. If you have multiple boxes, let's say, it's going to push your content, and it's on the outside of the border. So it's not at the outside of the box itself, it's where the border ends. So you got to remember that too, taking that border into account. So if you have a border of 2 pixels and a margin of 2 pixels, the box itself is going to space out 4 pixels because you add your border and your margin together. And it uses the same naming convention where you have a top, bottom, and right. And just like you saw with padding, if you want to use shorthand, top is the first number, right is the second number, bottom is the third number, and the last number is the left. So that's using that's your box model basically, using margin, padding, and border. So basically everything that you set on the page itself is going to have this available to you to push and to move and to control the layout. So you guys have any questions about any of this?
No.
You guys good? Okay. So yeah, that's basically your block model. So do you want to take everybody want to take like a quick 10-minute break? Is this
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, take a 10-minute break. Get some water or something. And then I want to go into what we should probably do is everybody done with the assignment? It was like the mundane moment. Did everybody finish that?
No.
No.
I will upload it by the end of today.
Oh, okay. Who?
Yeah, because I think there's still not enough knowledge for that.
Yes, it's too much.
Oh, okay. So did you have questions about it, or do you need help with it?
Just want an example.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can go through an example. What we can do is we can kind of go through floats and to see how you're going to position things on the page itself. So,
Like, what exactly do you want to see with our project?
Yeah, it's still weird about that.
Not like, yeah, like it's like not enough parameters.
I just want to see what you want to do, create from a creative standpoint. So you don't necessarily have to do anything in particular. I just want to see what you can do your creativity here and what you can do with the knowledge that you have so far. So there's really not like a bad way to do it, but if you can think about, and you're limited at first. So the whole idea with that assignment is you don't have a lot of CSS knowledge. So basically it's trying to convey what you want to convey with the limited types of tags and what you know so far. So I wouldn't worry about in terms of like final outcomes, does it have to look like anything in particular? It's like, no, it's just about maybe you start with the top and you go to the bottom and how you can tell a story based on that moment using what you know so far. So if you're thinking in terms of like, well, what am I supposed to design? Well, it can be whatever you want to design. So it's up to you. But if you have a design that you're trying to do and you're like, well, I'm trying to do this, then I guess what you can do is show me what you have so far and we can kind of go through it and then help you figure out the issue that you're trying to overcome. Does that help you?
I think so.
Maybe.
So it's not, yeah, I think I thought something when it was just like a word and was like rotated on yours.
Wait, talk about mine or what?
Well, when I saw what you submitted, right? It was like you were experimenting with something on the page itself.
Did it have like 5 pictures?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can just experiment. You don't have to, you take, images, it can be 5 images and then you put them on the page. And what I was looking for is one that was image dominant and one that was like text dominant. So how do you convey something if you don't have a lot of images? And how do you convey something if you don't have a lot of text? So the main idea would be, well, how do I just focus? Maybe it's like with scale, maybe you have 1 big image and 3 smaller images, or maybe with the text, you make the font really big and you have font sizes that are smaller. But it's kind of up to you what the final result is. It wasn't supposed to be, the outcome is basically what you choose.
Okay.
But let's take a break and then we'll come back and then we'll continue and maybe we can go through that.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
all right, so I'll be back in like 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
It's a YouTube channel.
What are you doing?
Are people online?
Yes.
I can't hear them.
Because everybody's taking a break.
Oh. What?
Is everybody back yet? Or let me know if you're back.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
back.
I'm here.
All right. So what I'll do is kind of show you maybe some examples so you understand. Really, that assignment was supposed to be pretty, it wasn't supposed to be a difficult assignment, meaning I didn't really want you guys to get too concerned about positioning yet because you're still learning some of these things. So trying to keep things like as simple as possible in the beginning. So I had two ideas to convey with the assignment. One was thinking about text and thinking about image. So you text an image and you had 2 moments. So let's say your mundane moment was going for a walk. So I'll just pull some pictures from the web here. So I'll just sidewalks is so let's say it's about going for a walk, and here's an image of a sidewalk. So let's say you just took pictures of sidewalks. So I'll copy some of these images and I'll throw them into an image folder. So I'll save this image here, and on my desktop, I'll create a new folder. So I'll call this one image-based mundane moment. And here I will create my image folder. So all my images go into a folder called images. And then I'll save my image here. Let's see, let's see, as I'm walking, I see things that interest me. So flowers by the sidewalk, whatever is that experience that you had. So I'll copy this, I'll save this image too. Maybe that's like another view. Let's say I look down, I see these plants. I'll save a couple more. I don't know what this is. Okay, I have a couple images here. So this is my experience. I'm walking down the sidewalk and I see plants and they're interesting. So I'll create a web page for that experience. So the image-based web page should have images that are nice and big. I think up to this point, we've only gone over some properties for CSS. So I don't really expect you to do too much with this because what you know so far. But in brackets, I will create a new web page for this. So I'll create a new web page, and this would be for my image base. So the image base concept, it should just be predominantly images, mostly images. You can have some text in there, which is fine, but I want it to be mostly images. So I will save this into that folder I created on my desktop. Call it index.html. Let's see, do I have that set up now? And then here's the web page. So for the image-based one, you can use image tags if you want, or you can use styles and put the image in a background. So we went over that. So there's two ways to do it. Now, if you're just using an image tag, you'll be limited, and it's just going to be a series of images. And that maybe that's all it is. So if you're just using the image tag, you can use image src equals, and then find those images. Let's say I have, I went on a walk, I saw 3 plants that were interesting to me. Let's see here. And let's see, sidewalk. I don't want to use that. Okay, so this was my experience. I mean, and that's it. I'm not asking you to really fully design anything, just to keep it simple. You can add a little bit of text, but it's supposed to be image-based. So, I can say, this was my morning walk.
Can you add dividers between the images?
Well, see, that's the thing I want you to start thinking about, though. So if you have this question in your head now, it's like, well, wait a second. I think it's okay. It's not too exciting. But what if I do want to add, like, dividers? So this is where I want you to start thinking about CSS and style sheets. Well, how can you do that? Now, if you wanted to, you don't have to add a style sheet. You can add a break. And like this. So here I'm using the BR tag to add break. So if you want to add it like that, you can. You can add the BR tag for break to create that spacing. And here I think I have to add I'm adding 2 for some reason. It wants me to add 2. But you can do it like that, or you can start to get into your style sheet. So for the image tag, I could just say MIG and maybe give it a margin. Now I gave it a bigger margin, a bigger break in between. So that's, this is my web page for that experience. Now, if you want to get into different types of designs, then you have to look into different types of style properties to play with different types of designs. So now I have it going from top to bottom. But let's say I want to have everything going from left to right. Well, then I can say float left, and then I can do that. So the idea is I just wanted to kind of explore lots of images on one page, web page. And then for your text-based one, it gets a little bit more difficult because you're using text to describe the experience. So you have to give more information to the person looking at the web page. So for my text-based page, I would think about that experience, but how do I convey it with text? Maybe you tell a story and maybe you start to change the color of your fonts as well. So that would be what the text-based one looks like. So do you understand a little bit better? I wasn't really asking for a lot in terms of design. You're going to kind of see what the limitation of just using HTML is, which is with this project, and that was kind of the purpose, to keep it kind of limited.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's very simple. It's like a simple exercise. If you want to be more creative with it, that's fine. So this is where we're, let's say, for example, you want to start playing with the scale of your images. So what we could do is with the image tag, you can give it a height and a width. So I can go into brackets, let's say for this plant image, I can say height equals, and then in quotes, say 100, and then for my width, say 100. Maybe now I'm playing with the scale, but I'm playing with the scale using the attributes for the tag. I'm not using a style for this. So that's one way to do it. Here I'm doing a combination. I'm floating them so they're next to each other, and then I'm playing with the scale. So, I decrease the size of that plant image. You could also say 50%. Now it's proportional. Well, that's not proportional. 50-50. So now I'm playing with the scale of the images too. So that's another way to do it. So it's just an exploration. So any other questions about that?
Yeah, how did you get them to do it horizontally instead of vertically?
So that's with the float. So using a float in my style sheet. So up here I have that float set to left. If your images are if all the images combined, the width of those images are less than what's on the page itself, they will, instead of going from top to bottom, when you use a float left in this style, it'll go from left to right. So if I increase the size of this page, now they're all going from left to right. And the one in the middle is stretching because I'm using that percentage. That's one way to position, to do some positioning on your web page. Let me see here. I have to have a computer here. I want to charging. So any other questions? So we'll do more of this in the next exercise. Because what I want you guys to do is create like a tabloid style layout in this next assignment. how many of you guys need more time with this current assignment then?
I think
You
I
need
can
more
finish it like tonight.
So, okay. I mean, it doesn't have to, I don't really want you to, I know a lot of you are really getting creative with it. And that's kind of why I wanted you to show me what your current progress was. Because then I can kind of help you in the direction that you're going. If you wanted me to like provide some examples saying, hey, maybe you should try using a float, or maybe you should position it a certain way. So that's kind of what I was thinking in terms of having you guys show me what you're doing. So if you want to show me something that you have and you have a question and you want to create a certain design, but you feel like you can't do it, show me what you have and we can kind of talk it through, right? You could schedule like a separate meeting with me, and then we could do like a one-on-one Zoom session if you want to do it like that. Like one-on-one, I'll kind of go through and provide you with some basic hints as to what you may want to try. So how does that sound? So if anybody wants that, I can go ahead and do that.
I mean, I have the little work in progress thing I turned in last week. I can look it over right now.
Yeah. I mean, you can always send me the work in progress as well, and I can help you that way. Yeah, just show me what you have so far.
Okay. Wait, I turned something in last week. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. I think it was like you had a word, and the word was positioned a certain way.
Was it? No. Oh, I think it was flower, but that was just like a little placeholder. It's not really like, wasn't supposed to be. I don't plan on keeping that there. I just wanted to have it there just as like a placeholder if I decided to do something else with it. But I have like a little streamline of images for some storytelling purpose.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do. Yeah, it wasn't like it was kind of an open-ended project, really. But it's kind of to push you think about what the limitations are with what you're doing, and to see if you can create a design based on the few things that you've known so far. It was almost in a way to get you a little like frustrated because it's like, why can't I position this the way I want to, kind of. That was kind of like the whole idea. So there wasn't like really a right or a wrong way to do the project, but it was really meant to start you thinking about how some of these different tags and styles and properties will let you position things on the page. So that was the ultimate goal. So a lot of it now, as you're working, it's going to revolve around using floats and the position property to really get things located in a certain way on the page itself. So you got to think in terms of what you can do with floats. So floats are, pretty versatile, and they can be used in a number of different ways. Basically the idea with a float is you take an element and you pull it away from the normal flow. So, sorry, it's like Siri responding. So a float property can be used on multiple elements, and it provides the ability to create a layout by floating elements directly next to each other. And it's a good way to create like multi-column layouts. So that's where you want to use a float. So a float basically accepts only two values. So you see up here, I have this float value with the plants. So the idea with the float too is when you use a float, you're using it with the box model, And where is my... So let me find the web page here. I don't know where it went. So let me, I'm just trying to find the web page associated with this brackets document. Where did this go? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through floats and kind of show you what you can do with floats. Let me just start a new page here. Because we're going to get more involved in positioning now. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one float exercise. And I'll create my page. So what I'll do for this, I'll create a couple of divs. So here's my head tag. I'll put a style tag in here. And I have my body tag. And then my body tag, I'm just going to create a couple of divs. And I'm going to give these classes. So I'm going to say class equals left. So we're going to have something on the left side of the page. Div class equals right. And then div class, actually in the middle, I'm going to have one div class equals center. And I'm going to do exactly what we did with the flower example. And here I'm going to create a style for my div. So one of the things you can do is you can create multiple styles and apply them to the same thing. So let's say I want to have these divs all be the same height. I'll say height of 100 pixels. But let's say I want to have them have different colors and different widths. So what you can do is then apply a class to each one of the divs, and each class can be different. So I can give this one, the left one, a background color of red. And then I'll cut and paste this. So the center one can be blue, and the right one, kind of doing it, the order is kind of the opposite that it is down below, green. And then I'll also give each one a width. So in this example, what I'm doing is giving each one like a different percentage, because I want them to all appear together. So let's say I have a layout where the left and the right are narrow and the middle one is more wider. So if I have 3 things on the page and I want those 3 things to be next to each other, I'll use my floats, but I'll also make sure that the widths together add up to 100. So here, I'll actually make a comment in here. I'll say widths must add up to 100%. If I want each of these three things to be side by side. So what I can say here is, let's say I want two very narrow ones. I'll make these narrow ones 15%. And I'll make the center item 70%. And then this right one will also be 15%. Now, right now, I'm not using any floats. So when you look at this, and I have to find where this exists. I'm going to have to do this because I have too much on the screen here. So I'm going to open up that file directly from Chrome. Because I have too many windows open and brackets is having a hard time finding where that window is. So I'm going to go into float exercise. Okay, there it is. So this is what I have so far. And let's see, something's missing. So here in brackets, center, background color, let's see. Something's missing with this background color. Oh, I spelled, I didn't have class spelled correctly, so, okay.
I think you're missing a semicolon in line 12 with 15%.
Oh, there you go. Yep. No. I think it's not being. I think my browser is going really slow.
Line 12.
No, it's okay. My browser is going really slow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when I update something, like let's say I change the color here to purple, hit save. It's not responding. But if I go into Chrome and I go into open, it responds. So what's happening is right now I have too many tabs open in Chrome, probably, and I have to start closing some tabs. Okay, so, but you can see it's working. So I have divs that all are following this height because it's being applied to all the divs. And then I have left, center, and right with different colors and different widths. Now, if I add the float, and I have to go back into Chrome and I'll open that. Usually I'd use that little lightning bolt, but it's just being so slow. Now I have the layout that I want because I have 15% red, 70% purple, and 15% green. So it's starting to get to what I want. You know, what you would do is you'd figure out your design in your wireframe. So maybe what I want to do now is, let's say I want to have like a header and a footer for this. So in my body, I'm going to actually use header because there's a header tag, and then I use footer because there's a footer tag. Now my header, I can have that set to, I don't have to use a float. It's going to go on top of everything basically, but I want to have it the same width as everything else. So now I'll use a width of 100%, and then a height set to pixels. So I can say maybe the height is 70 pixels, and then maybe color set to orange, let's say. And I'll go and open this up. And let's see, oh, sorry, background color. So that's my header. And then for my footer though, what happens is if I create this footer, and I'll use the same, I'll do the same thing that I did with header. But you don't actually see the footer. What happens is I have to clear it out. What you have to do is you have to use something called a clear, to clear out the floats. So if you have these floats set to left, what I would have to do to have this footer appear is actually use a clear. And the clear has basically 3 properties you want to use. If you use a clear of both, that should be helpful because sometimes you have to clear out a left, sometimes you have to clear out a right. And hold on one second. And once I use that clear now, what the clear does is it allows that next element in the HTML to actually appear. Otherwise, what happened was if you don't clear it out, then the next thing is going to be floated to the left as well. So let me go back into the code so you can see it in brackets here. So here's the code now. So I have my left, center, right with their colors and their widths. I have a footer, and I have a header. And without the float, I'm going to put a comment here, and you can add comments to your code, and that will let you troubleshoot. So if I add a / asterisk, I'm basically blocking this clear. I'm turning it into a comment, and save that and open it up again. See how it went away? That's because the float for that footer, the float from here, this right here, is being applied to the footer as well. So you got to clear out your floats. It's kind of a weird thing to think about. Do you guys understand that though? Like what happens with the floats is if you have a float and then you have an element coming after it, here the right class style sheet has a float. That element coming after this is actually, the float is being applied to that as well. So it's a weird kind of quirk with a float, is that it will keep on applying the float unless you clear it. And that's why we have to use this clear both. You'll kind of see what happens if I take the height of that float, make it 200, and change the color to pink, let's say, and then go back here and open it. And let's see. Oh, I have to make it like a big number, like 300. So you see it appears now, but what's happening is this pink footer is following that normal flow from top to bottom. So if I want, so it's actually starting here underneath the orange, but these three boxes right here are overlapping it because they didn't clear it out. So now if I, and you can even see it better if I add a border. If I add a border to the footer, make the border 2 pixels, red, solid red. And actually, I'll make the border even bigger. So you see how I have that border, but it's overlapping? And maybe it'll be better if I make it, I'll make it just black. I'll make it a black border. It's going slow. See how it's overlapping? Well, to get rid of that overlap, I have to use a clear. So here I have a clear of both. And then I got rid of it. So does everybody understand that?
Yes.
So, okay. So that's important to think about using these floats, and then the next thing that you want to return back to that flow from top to bottom in that sequence of elements on in your HTML, that one item that you don't want to be floated or you want to be seen properly, make sure you use this clear. You can use a clear of left, and it will do the same thing. So nothing's changed. But if I use a clear of right, the clear of right is not going to work because my floats are to the left. So that's why sometimes a clear of both is just an easy solution, because it doesn't matter what you had. It's going to clear out both the left and the right.
I have a question.
Sure.
So instead of clear both, if you put float left in the footer, won't it do the same thing visually?
Yeah, it's gonna float it. So
But
what
then
that
it would float kind of to also to the bottom, right?
no, it would float left and float right are positioning things horizontally, basically, positioning things next to each other. So use floats as a way to create columns on the page itself. Yeah, it's not going to. So if I use a float of left for the footer, you'll see there'll be a pink box coming after the green.
Yes.
Now, what will happen though, if my web page is scaled down, it will go to the bottom. So let's say, so in a way you are correct, but if I make my web page like, if this pink box was, set to like, well, I guess you're right, because since these all add up to 100, if anything is over 100, it will be pushed to the bottom. But let's say this purple box was 40, and then this footer was set to 30. So it should come next. It should come next to it.
Well, because your margin adds your margin would add it, like it would, like would the border 23 pixels,
oh, yeah.
it would kick it like out of.
Yeah. So maybe if I do like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So now it's coming. Yeah, now it's going to the left because using a float left. Yeah, so in a way you're right. If these three first boxes add to 100, then the fourth box will be pushed to the bottom because the floats are looking at a total of 100%. Yeah, and then you do have to take into account the border as well. So if the border is going to add a width greater of 100, then it will be also pushed to the bottom. So that's so yeah, you're right. Yep. So that's how you want to think about positioning with floats. So what you can explore is how type and image work together with this idea. And you can start to think about wireframes that will create a certain design that you want. So that's what I want you to start really thinking about is how these floats can be used to create certain designs. So let's say if I want to have like text going alongside, let's say for some kind of design, and maybe the image going to the right of that, then I would want to use, I'll comment out the div in the footer down here and open it up. And then let's say I want to have like text vertically running in a column and then a big image. So for my center, which is now technically the right, I'll make that like 85. Actually, I'll make it a little bit less. I'll make it 75. But I'll give it a margin right of 20 pixels. So I have a little bit of space there. And then I'll increase the height to 600 pixels. And then maybe I want an image here, but maybe I want text running up and down along the side. So let me actually kind of do that. Let me grab an image. I'll go to my desktop and I will here, and I'll grab my images from the exercise we did before the break. And then what I'll also do is I'll go into Illustrator and I'll create some text. So I have a new Illustrator document. I'm going to make it smaller, so I'm going to drag the side here. Kind of reflect the size of the web page. And then I'm going to just create like a headline, but let's say you want a headline that's running to the side. So I'll just create a headline that says flowers with the type tool. And I'll just pick an interesting font. How about, I saw something that I liked. Here, I'll use this one. But I want the text to actually be running along the side. So I'm going to rotate it. And I'll also increase the space. So I'm going to go into Windows, Type, Character, and increase the spacing between the letters. Here. So I'll put this right here. And then what I'll do with this is when I save it, I'm going to go to Save. I'll just go to Save As. I'll pick SVG. And then I will save this into images for my float exercise. I'll call it title. Save. And then on my web page, I've lost brackets here. It looked like it closed. I'll go back into that float document. So here, my footer, I want to use a background image. So And I'll say for that image, I'll select that SVG graphic I just created. So I'll say URL, I'll go into the images folder, and I thought I put it in there. Let me go back to the desktop. Oh, I forgot to save it. So have to hit save. Okay, now I'll go back into brackets. And it's still not there. So let me double check where I saved this. Okay, it's there. Let me make sure it's in the right folder, because for some reason I'm not seeing it. Folder. And let me go back. Again, let me do this again. It's not, I don't know why it's not going into the folder I want. Okay, so there it is, title. So I have a title, and then let's say for my, oh, I'm sorry, and I don't want to put it into my footer. I want to put it into this left bar here. And then for center, I'll do the same thing. I'll pick like a flower image. So I'll say background image, URL, images. I'll just pick something like that. Okay, so now let's see. And here I'm going to open it up. And so this is what I got. So so here's that design, but I have the words going to the left side, positioned differently than what you would expect, and then like the flower image. And the other thing that's happening though is when you use this background image, it tiles automatically. So then you can say, if you don't want that to happen, you say background, repeat, and then you say no repeat. And I'll copy this and I'll add this to here as well. And you got that. So So it's just another example of how you can use floats.
Is there a way you can get it just like I repeat it like 2 times?
Yeah. So let's say. Let's see. You could say. Let's see. You know, if you want to do that, that gets a little bit more complicated. But if you wanted to have it repeat twice, you might want to just think about having 2 boxes here, or just in your image in Photoshop, let's say, create an image where it already has it twice. There's ways to do that, but if you have to get into like some JavaScript to actually specify, okay, I only want 2 to appear here. So, you know, you would have to, here in center, and down below, you might have to have another div. So you could have center 1, and then center 2, and then center 1, you would have like the height set to, you know, smaller size, and then you would create a center 2. So you want to do something like that?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So you'd have to like just manually create, like you just have to type it in.
You'd have to manually do it. There's actually a way to do it, but it gets a little complicated. Like somebody out there is asking, like,
do
how do you,
background?
what was the question?
Couldn't you just do background repeat in order to achieve that?
I mean, you could also, yeah, do background repeat. And if your image is set to, like if this one up here was 100 pixels and the one down below was 100 pixels, just make your height 200 pixels. And that's another way to do it.
Can you try it?
Yeah, so let's say I'll get rid of one of these centers, so I'll take away the commenting. So I'm just going to add using a comment to take away the CSS. So I got rid of the bottom image. So I don't know how big this image is. What you would first want to do is go into Photoshop and just figure out what the size of that image is. So I'm just gonna, let's see. Let me actually look at. So that image, if I go to properties here, just on in the folder itself, so that image height is 480 pixels. So I just right-clicked and went into details. So I don't have to go into Photoshop, so I know what that size is. Okay, so if I know it's 480 pixels tall, what I can do with the style for that is just multiply it by 2, make it 960, and then instead of saying no repeat, say repeat. And then when I go back into when I open it up, oops. What I have to do actually is repeat it in one direction. So it's doing the repeat from that I want, but it's giving me more from left to right. So you can either go figure out what your size is, or for background repeat, you can say repeat X, or actually repeat Y. So remember how I talked about X and Y? X is going across, Y is going top to bottom.
Yeah.
I say repeat Y. I have to fix that. That's a mistake. And now I have the 2 images.
Oh yeah, I think that's smarter.
Yeah, you can do it like this as well. This is probably better because you're using less code to do the same exact thing. Now, if you change the height, it's going to affect everything and cause more to repeat.
Wait, can you do that again? So the repeat Y, it does exactly what you just did, right? Sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, I'm using repeat Y.
Okay.
So for background repeat, you have no repeat, and then you have repeat X and repeat Y. So you have those 3 properties. You also have repeat, but by default, it's set to repeat. So I do repeat X. It's repeating it from left to right.
Okay, that's repeat. Okay.
Yeah, so you can do repeat Y or repeat X to control the direction that the images repeat.
Oh, okay. That's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, so it's a nice. So you have some control there. So any other questions about, those are some things to help you with layout. Any other questions? That's how you use floats, and using floats in combination with using background repeats. And I just wanted to show you this example too with the text, because it lets you think about how you can position text. To get my text like this though, I'm using Photoshop or Illustrator to create that positioning first and then bringing it in as an image. But it's a nice different type of layout that you can create. So any other questions? So how many of you, so for this one assignment that you are already working on, it's assignment 3? Is it assignment 3? I think it's assignment 3. How many of you have handed that in?
I just uploaded it.
Oh, okay.
But it's not
I
finished. I'll upload it by the end of the night.
Oh, okay. So let's see. Let me take a poll. How many of you are finished with assignment 3? You can hit yes or no. So I should see people hitting yes or no.
Wait, where?
It's in the, there should be, is it with chat, or is there a way to, when you do a chat with me, can you just hit a yes or a no button?
Oh, you want us to go in the... Okay.
Yeah. Go in the, do you see where it's at?
Yeah, I see the
I just
chat.
did it for myself. Connie said yes. You see that? It's, I think it's in your chat area.
Oh, it's in the participants box.
Or is it in participants?
Yeah.
I'm not even,
Okay.
I'm taking a poll. So how many people are done with assignment 3?
Half and half.
Like I'm kinda.
Well, if you're not done, what I'm trying to figure out is, if you're not done, what we'll do is, do you guys want more time to work on assignment 3?
I think I could probably knock it out like over lunch or something.
I kind of get the feeling everybody wants more time though.
Yeah, yeah.
All day.
Does everybody agree?
Yes.
I think I can get mine done by like at least tomorrow, at the most tomorrow morning.
But I don't want to give you assignment 4 if you feel like you need more time with assignment 5.
I think I need like 2 hours, or actually no, even like 1 hour, 1 hour to 2 hours.
Okay. What about everybody else?
That's just me.
Probably like until tomorrow for me.
Okay.
I have an idea what I want to do.
Yes, tonight or tomorrow would be great.
Okay. Felicia? Some people may have dropped out.
What
Jack-
is assignment 4?
Jackie, what about you?
I think tomorrow is fine.
Okay, let's do that. I'll send out a note. Well, not even tomorrow. Let's have it due next Saturday. I mean, I'll give you guys more time, because I feel like you know we've been talking for 3 hours now, so it's a lot to give you, right, all at once. So why don't I give you more time to do that, and then if you want to start assignment 4, you can do that. So let me kind of go over what assignment 4 is, because you'll need to use a lot more floats in assignment 4. So I'm going to have to, one thing, let's, so let me show you what assignment 4 is. Oh, one thing I should tell you too is that the school is working on getting everybody access to Photoshop and Illustrator.
Wow.
So
Would
Adobe is working something out where you can have free access, I think for like 6 months, and you'll use your regular login that you use at PCC. So don't go out and buy the subscription because I think they'll soon have it. It'll probably be next week, beginning of next week.
what if you already have like a subscription? Can they happen to give us a free? Can they happen to use our existing account?
Yeah, I mean, if you already have it, you can just keep your existing account. Or
But
if
like
you
with a free subscription.
yeah, if you have more computers at home, you can use multiple accounts. So that's an option too. So either way, you can do it if you want to.
Okay. Use free account?
I don't know why I have assignment 5. It should be assignment 4. So assignment 4 is I want you to create one page that kind of looks like the cover for a sensationalist tabloid. Now, when I use the word sensationalist tabloid, do you know what I'm talking about? I have examples here. And it's kind of like these, like the National Enquirer, where you have like big blocks of text, and then you have an image. So the layout is pretty simple, but sometimes you'll have like creative versions of this. Here's more ideas. The popular one was Bat Boy. There's one with Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton adopts alien baby. So some of these are going to have like text going in different directions. So I want you to kind of explore your own version. So what you can do is make up like a funny story of some sort for your tabloid, and then figure out how you want the text set up and how you want the images set up. A very popular one was Bat Boy tabloid cover. So here's a popular one, Bat Boy Lives. There's actually like a Broadway musical about Bat Boy. There's Giuliani as Bat Boy. But basically, big text, big image, and come up with like a funny name of some sort for the tabloid itself, and it's like the cover. The first thing I want you to do, though, is come up with a wireframe. And if you want, you can start this, and we can review it next week. Come up with a wireframe. You can draw it by hand if you want to draw it by hand, or use Illustrator or Photoshop. The idea is, though, I want you to use CSS so you're not following the top-down approach of HTML. Have an image side by side, explore columns and grids. So it's really starting to use the float a little bit more. First, come up with the wireframe. Step 1. Step 2, do some research using these sensationalist tabloids as inspiration. And then use the CSS we've learned so far to make sure that the design is achievable. So do the wireframe first, and then we'll look over the wireframes, and then we'll figure out what you want to do. So think about text direction and text and image together. Jason, why did you give me a thumbs down? Did you give me a thumbs down, or is that supposed to be your no?
No, that was supposed to be my no. I was just trying to.
Yeah, okay. We'll get more used to Zoom. So if you're done with, if you decide, okay, I'm done with assignment 3, you can go on to assignment 4. But if you want to have more time on assignment 4 because of everything that's going on, spend more time on it, and then hand it to me, give it to me on Saturday. So you can hand in that assignment 4 on Saturday. So how does that sound?
It's cool.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up.
So anyways, I think we covered a lot. You have the box model, more information on that. We went through floats. Once I'm done with the Zoom, it's going to record it, and then I'll send the recording to YouTube. But I'll kind of divide up the YouTube video so you don't have one long video. You'll have several shorter videos. So you'll have a video on the box model, probably a video on think units, knowing what units to use, whether you use M's, relative units, or absolute units. And then I'll do one on floats, because we went over floats. Is there any other questions? So I guess we can break right now. If you want to like schedule like one-on-one time and you have questions, just send me an email and we can do like a one-on-one Zoom session, and then we can share our screens and I can look at what you're working on. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jackie, are you there? I'm going to unmute Jackie.
Yeah.
Hello? Jackie, are you there?
Yeah.
So if you need help, just let me know and we can do like a one-on-one session.
All right.
And then Felicia, I think everybody's probably, some people probably went to lunch. So we'll do that, okay? And if you guys have any questions, just let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then
Is the also the code, for example, like earlier at like 10 a.m. you're going over like M's and like all that code where you post those examples?
yeah, I'll post all those examples.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Sorry about the last time. I posted it in Zoom, and I guess once you end the Zoom session, a lot of that stuff goes away. So I'll post the float example and the unit example, because I think those two are good examples, especially when you get into the floats. Those can be more helpful.
Okay, cool.
So we meet again in about an hour at 1:30.
Well, let's take a lunch. Actually, like with the class itself, the first half is lecture and the last half is you working. So if you want to meet like one-on-one, just send me an email and then we can meet one-on-one and I can help you with your projects. That's kind of like the second half of the class is where I kind of go around the room and help you. But I'm not here, so we can do it like that. You just let me know, and we can kind of work on the project still. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, because I'm going to close. What I'll do is I want to close the Zoom because I think it's a lot. And that's what we'll do. And then, yeah, so send me your emails. If nobody sends me one, then like that's fine. You can like kind of figure out what you want to do for the rest of your day. But just have assignment 3 done by Saturday. And then if you're done already, then you can just start assignment 4.
All right.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to shut down for now. So have a good lunch. And then I will talk to everybody either this afternoon if you want, or I'll talk to you guys the next Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then if you have any questions, just let me know too. And we can, I can meet up with you like one-on-one during the week as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All righty. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.